This is episode number 26 of the Silvertrack Extra, where we're talking about how to deal with a repeat loiterer.
Thanks for tuning in to the Silvertrack Extra, your source for the best tips, tricks, and how-tos to dominate the security industry, helping you improve your business, win more contracts, and crush your competition. Here are your hosts, Chris Anderson and Johnny Page.
What's up, Silvertrack Nation? This is Johnny Page, and I am joined with my co-host, Chris Anderson, and this is episode number 26 of the Silvertrack Extra, and today we're talking about how to deal with a repeat loiterer. And it seems like this is a question that pops up time and time again, Chris, among the officers that we deal with on a daily basis. And it just seems like a nagging issue for a lot of the commercial properties, residential properties out there. And Chris, we are no stranger to this in the security industry.
No, absolutely. It's become a problem because people are losing jobs, becoming unemployed, and then the clients expect us to be the police, right? So they ask these guys to, that's why they hire a lot of us, right? They think we are the police.
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up in North Carolina in a very snowy town. And so before I moved to California, we never really had any type of homeless issues around because it wasn't a very pleasant place to live outside. Somehow people figured out a way to make it indoors, or I guess they all came to California because when I moved here, it was like a whole nother world. It's incredible how many people actually settle for that lifestyle. Of course, some have a choice, some don't. But either way, it poses a security risk for a lot of the properties that our customers are serving. And so, Chris, today let's just go through a couple of steps that officers or these supervisors can take while they're in the field when dealing with someone that will continuously hang out on the property and cause a disruption to the normal flow of business.
Sure, absolutely. Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, the first note that we've taken here is that the first step is making sure that we politely address the individual. Of course, we have to do this at a safe distance, and we want to be informing them that if they don't have a purpose on the property, that they need to leave. And of course, there's several ways that we can go about doing this, but Chris, it's super important that we remain professional at all times.
Yeah, you have to be not only professional, guys, but listen, when you're coming across these people, you got to remember a lot of them have mental issues. They're not even going to even know who you are, okay? So you need to really evaluate the situation. You need to keep your distance in talking to them. You obviously need to be polite because if you raise your voice, right, you could set off something and not be prepared for it. So you need to take a look at and see if this person's been kind of, what I did, John, is I looked at the guy that was there. Did he look like he was long-term? Was he living there, or was he just stopping for, a nap or a break? So you need to really evaluate the situation before you start talking to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that you can do ahead of time before your shift to really prepare, especially when you know you're working a site where this is sort of a regular issue, is just have some shelter and community resource information available. Know where the local shelters are, know where they can get a hot meal, know where they could potentially get a shower, and use those as ways to hopefully develop a rapport with the individual there, and that you're on their team. You want to see them, in a better situation, but that it just can't be there. So you're willing to help, but you need to make sure that they leave that area of the property. And so that's certainly a strategy that I know has worked several times.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing too, guys, make sure that we should put some little care package for yourself. Make sure you got some cleaners and some wipes so you can wash your hands. You may want to have some gloves in the car just in case you come across, because sometimes they're going to ask you to help carry, or if you do carry something for them, you got to be very careful because these guys sometimes carry weapons, right, to protect themselves where they're at, especially if they're living there. They've got other people that want their property and their items, so they'll come up with different ways to design a club or maybe a knife. So you have to be very careful and think of your own safety and health, because some can really be carrying some serious diseases.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Chris. And I think that another thing we can do before going on shift is making sure that we understand the city ordinances, the infractions, what's allowed and what isn't, because there are certainly some very lenient laws in terms of loitering in the state of California. For example, I know that legally they're allowed to be on the sidewalk. Right, the city sidewalks is public property, and they're able to be there. There are strategies for having them leave the area if they're creating a disturbance or if they're causing an issue. But we just need to know where the boundaries are at, especially in your local area.
Yeah, you definitely need to do that because they know the game. Okay, they've been approached before. They know exactly where to sleep. They know where to stand where they can't be, challenged. And again, a lot of it, and you have to look, John, some of these cities don't even have that municipal code written, right? So unless there's an actual crime, right, the police aren't just going to wrap this guy, especially me when I was a cop. It's the last thing I wanted to do is stick somebody dirty in my car, all right, and drive around 8 hours afterwards to smell this guy in my car. I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And I was not thrilled to go to this call when a guard called me and said, hey, I got this guy, I need to arrest him, right? It's the last thing I want to do. So if you want to become friends with your local law enforcement and get a good response, make sure that you learn how to work with these people and use all the resources you can to eliminate the problem before you make that call.
Absolutely. And then as we're addressing the situation, as this becomes an issue, you'll start to know as it begins to escalate. You've asked him to leave, and really in about 30 seconds to 5 minutes, you're going to know if this is going to become a problem or not. And this is the time where we need to start surveying the area, taking a note of their physical situation. Like you said, Chris, are they looking to be here permanently? Are they setting up some sort of shelter? Do they already have a shelter set up? Or are they just passing through? What type of physical property do they have with them? Are they toting 4 grocery carts stacked full of cans, or their sleeping gear? Take note of their mental health. Are they, there are certainly signs that you can be looking for that maybe this person isn't well, maybe they're under the influence. And then we just need to be careful and considerate in communicating with them, finding a way to address the situation that's going to set us up to successfully have them leave the property. Understand that you can't go in with a formula every single time saying this is A, B, C, and D exactly how we do, because these are human beings. We have to find a way to address each one individually to potentially have a successful outcome.
Yeah, John, here's what you got to look at. If the guy's playing with a G.I. Joe or a Barbie doll, chances are he's got a mental problem, okay? No lie, all right? I got to tell you, when I was a police officer, one of the things they used to do to abuse us, right? We used to go out and just to make an arrest. So if we did something wrong, they go, oh, let's go down and arrest a drunk, and I'll teach you and make sure you know how to book this guy. Well, we went down to the end of the park there, and they found some transients, and the guy says, why don't you go up there? I know that guy's under the influence. Hook him up. He's loitering, right? And this is police. They're trying to torture me. So I went over to pat this guy down. This poor guy had a G.I. Joe in his pocket and a Barbie doll, and a big, huge lump on his head, right? And I'm going, really? I mean, we're going to really take this guy to jail? I mean, come on. So, here's the best way. And I'll share this with some listeners real quick. Get a candy bar. Get some water. Just get some change. And if you talk to these guys friendly, right, you can encourage them off. They'll do anything for a Snicker bar, all right? So go to the store, to the candy store, and get just bags of packs of candy. Get some towels, something clean. Be kind-hearted. A lot of times these guys will get up and move if they're not really living there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No? Yeah.
Yeah, be willing to listen. Well, Chris, we have a few more tactics we'd like to share in regards to dealing with a repeat loiterer. But before we do that, let's hear from our sponsors over at Paperless Proposal.
Does your security business need to create business proposals to win clients? Are you frustrated by how much time and resources it takes to create and manage your proposals? If yes, I want to introduce you to Paperless Proposal Software. With Paperless Proposal Software, you can easily create impressive business proposals in minutes, and Paperless Proposal Software allows you to quickly and easily track and manage all of your proposals. Get a free demo at www.paperlessproposal.com/Silvertrack.
Chris, I know you and I are a huge fan of the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and there's a lot of really great tactics in there for just defusing potentially confrontational situations and making sure that you're basically, in effect, you're walking around, you're going side by side with them instead of creating a very head-to-head confrontational situation. Just be friendly, right? And hopefully they understand that you have a job to do, and then they'll oblige and move along. Now, that's not always the case, and if the police do have to be contacted, there's a couple of things that we should be remembering. First and foremost is that where this ranks in importance to the police, right? There's, especially depending on the area that you're in, there could be hundreds of things that are going on, and so this may not be top priority for the police. And if that is the case, Chris, what are some recommendations for the officers as this sort of escalates?
Yeah, well, let me give everybody, here's what you should here's the best way to handle this, okay? Now, as an officer, when I went to the location, I'm going to be honest with you, I was pretty upset. If I'm going to go there and I have to stick somebody dirty in my car, we already talked about that. So as a security guard, I want you to think about the position that the officer, he's booked, he's got a lot of calls on that monitor he's got to go to, and the last thing he needs to do is hook this guy up and take him to jail, all right? So he's going to do everything he can to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, if there's a crime that occurred, and a serious crime, he's going to have no choice. But the typical first warning, he just can't go off your information. So if you're there and you've got documentation in hand that shows that this guy's been an ongoing problem, he's been a threat, he's actually a liability to not only himself or the people that are around there, then there's a lot of things they could do under the health and safety code. It's what they call 5150. You may have heard that, right? It's a standard health and safety code they use to put somebody away for a 72 evaluation so you can get them in custody and remove them from the problem or that area. But you got to make sure you have all those ducks in a row. But before that, if you don't have that, what you really want to do is when the officer arrives, if you really feel that you need to make that call because your client's putting the pressure on you, tell the officers to arrive and say, listen, I'm not expecting you to do anything. I understand. I'm really sorry that I had to call you out here. Is there anything you can do to help me kind of push this guy down the road, or maybe give him a 5-minute ride on top of your hood there, or you tell me, you tell me what we got to do here. I really appreciate you responding, but this is the situation, and I'll tell you, you'll develop a lot of respect to that local officer because you may need him one of these times, and you don't want him bad-mouthing you to the other folks that are coming that may need to come to that call if you ever call him again. And it's reality. So remember when you're doing that, okay? So think about some of the things we talked about earlier, some candy, water bottles, call them by their first name, address them as sir, and see if you can scoot them down the road by bribing them, okay? Truly. And, John, we could talk about some of the other funny things if you want.
Yeah, now you do have a couple of unconventional ways that you've addressed these situations in the past. I think it would be first. There's one particular story I know you've shared with me before about what you did when you were a police officer when you did have to show up for those calls. Do you mind sharing that with the listeners?
Yeah, I'll do that, absolutely. So, I was approached by a guard, and he told me, he said, listen, this guy keeps showing up. He's driving me crazy. I've asked him to leave the property. He just refuses. Now, take in mind the transient that I'm dealing with at a particular time is pretty stable mentally. He's just jobless, right? Homeless, and he's a problem. So what I do is I usually would put him in the back of my car, and then I would take one shoe off, of course, and I'd drive him about 50 miles as far as I could, southbound, right? And then I would drop him off and give him a bottle of water and let him walk back on one shoe. So it works out. It works out pretty good, In that way, it's better than custody because I'll tell you, if I would have to take him to jail, he'd be out before I got off shift anyhow.
Yeah, it's funny that a lot of times that's a reward, right? There's not too much else to lose. I know in the small town that I was from, there was only one homeless guy. Everyone knew him. His name was Joshua, right? And
right.
Every October, November, when things started to get cold, he'd steal a car, go turn himself in, and he'd get 6 months, and he would have a warm bed, he'd have food to eat,
yeah.
and that's how he spent the winter. And everyone knew where Joshua was over those 6 months. Sure enough, May or June, he'd turn up, and he'd be right back where he was when we last saw him. So yeah, it's interesting lifestyle they have. Unfortunately, we do have to deal with that in the security industry. So hopefully today you found a couple of techniques, just understanding at the end of the day, use common sense, be courteous, and treat people like human beings. And hopefully that is enough to address the situation. If it's not, understand what it takes when you are getting the police involved and how to handle that situation. Anything else you want to add, Chris?
No, I was just going to give another unconventional way. I know we're on time here, but some of the things you guys could do, if these guys are showing up at a different time or they typically show up late at night to sleep, what I used to do is I would, hate to put it this way, but I would water the ground, right? Or take manure if it's a grass area where the smell was real bad, and I put manure down. So anything I could do to make it uncomfortable before they got there, or the ground was maybe wet so their cardboard wouldn't fit. I know it sounds bad, but we had to think of other ways to kind of discourage from coming. So if you got that available to you, and the bribing and the candy bars aren't working, Just something to think about, unfortunately.
I would say you could get pretty creative if you spent about a half an hour on Google. You could find some pretty interesting techniques to address loitering in your area. I know that there's a lot out there, some funny stories. We won't share them here because we don't want to be liable. But
yeah, we could get into smoke grenades and firecrackers. Those are a really good time.
Yeah.
It makes the shift pass by really quick,
Yeah, totally. That's the last thing we want, is that someone reports with Silvertrack that they used a firecracker to remove a loiterer from the property.
Yeah, everybody loves July 4th and transients, right? Yeah.
Right. Awesome, guys. Well, if you want more information on the subject today on how to deal with a repeat loiterer, there is always a more detailed article on the show notes section of this episode at silvertracksoftware.com/26. We'd love to hear your questions. Again, this was another one of those that was submitted to our questions section, questions that you guys are asking. We enjoy answering here on the show. So visit silvertracksoftware.com/questions and submit those to Chris and I. We'll be happy to handle them here on the Silvertrack Extra. And until next time, my name is Johnny Page.
I'm Chris Anderson.
This was the Silvertrack Extra, and we'll talk to you soon.
This has been another episode of the Silvertrack Extra. For more insider information, visit silvertracksoftware.com/extra. Listen on the go by subscribing in iTunes. Want to hear your questions answered on the show? Visit silvertracksoftware.com/questions to submit your requests.